Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, June 4th, 2025, and today on the Roundup we're going to be answering three questions we've been hearing from international educators coming out of NAFSA last week in San Diego. And boy, what a week it was. We got a lot of bombshells dropped during the first couple of days of the conference, Tuesday and Wednesday, and plenty of discussions and consternation was had by all. So we'll talk about that in our first couple of topics today. But wanted to say, as we do each week, a thank you to those of you who are subscribed either to our podcast version of the Roundup here, that's audio only, available on all major podcast providers, or watching live or on repeat on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. So thank you for being watching the Roundup. Also to those of you who subscribe to the newsletter, which is where we get our questions each week from the news stories we cover in our newsletter that comes out on Monday morning, and that is available in two forms, either in the email version that you can get by subscribing on our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. Go down to the subscribe button and you can add in your details and receive the newsletter in your inbox every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'll be dropping a link to that most recent edition in the chat on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please do make sure you get that and include that in your reading each week. We'll also have a version available on LinkedIn. This is a similar version, so if you prefer getting your news via LinkedIn on International Ed Sources, you certainly sign up there as well. It's same newsletter name, all the SMIE news fit to share, and you can search that on LinkedIn, all the SMIE news, and you'll be able to find us, or SMIE Consulting, be able to find that link very easily. So what we do is we look at the newsletter stories, which cover everything from social media topics to what is happening with upcoming webinars, data reports, blogs, anything new and exciting on the social front, how AI is being used, other kind of tech tools, and how we can leverage those in what we do in international education. Those will be covered in the social media section. Then we have three parts of our main international ed news. One is a U.S. roundup of what's going on in the United States, news stories that impact what we do here in the U.S. based on government policy decisions, new phenomenon happening that we need to be aware of. Then a solutions central section that looks at some positive news and how people are applying solutions to what they are experiencing in international ed circles. And the final section is a global roundup, which looks at how international ed news is impacted and trends are impacting other countries around the globe. As this is an international student mobility topic that we cover regularly, it's important for us in the U.S. to have perspective as to what's going on around us. And including with that discussion, we know, obviously, if you haven't been living under a rock, you know that the U.S. is not the only major destination that has been experiencing significant turmoil with regards to its government policy changes. We've seen it first in Canada, then in Australia, then in the UK, each of which has had major disruptions to government policy related to migration, related to visas, related to internal debates in those countries, related to housing shortages, related to overuse of public services like health services and transportation that international students, wrongly in most cases, were receiving the blame for that. So these are the kinds of topics we cover each week, and between the LinkedIn version and the email version, we now have over 2,500 subscribers to the newsletter. So such an important contributor to the overall discussion and discourse on international ed topics here in the United States and abroad. So thank you all to those who watch. who subscribe to the newsletter. So we take the themes we see developing in those news stories each week, and we apply those to the questions we ask here on Wednesday afternoon, where we do go next level deep into the topics at hand and provide kind of our analysis on what we see as some of the ways these policies can be interpreted, are being interpreted, and how perhaps we can apply knowledge that we're learning in these through these stories, specifically to how we manage what we do in international education on our campuses. So let's get right into it with our first question. That is, what did we learn about social media and visa delays last week after the announcements on Tuesday morning? Well, if you weren't living under a rock, and certainly even attending NAFSA, and even if you weren't, and just paying attention to what's going on in the news and fielding emails from your students who are maybe applying for visas shortly, there was widespread panic, and this is the modus operandi of the Trump administration when it comes to things international as well as domestic chaos that they like to cause. And the chaos theory of governance that we've talked about here on the Roundup and in presentations I've done in the past couple of months, we know that this government, as with the amount of executive orders, volume of executive orders that were introduced over the first few weeks and days and weeks, and then subsequent ones, and the way policies are rolled out and announced, often don't have a lot of specificity and don't really provide any details as to how implementation might be happening, when, where, all of these kind of things. And that is truly the case with what happened on Tuesday morning last week. So for those not in the know, on Tuesday morning, or maybe it was early afternoon by the time we all got the news, there was an announcement from the State Department that there would be a pause on new interview capacity at consulates and embassies overseas. And I want to get the wording right because that is what has caused a lot of consternation. And the main reason why that was the case had much to do with the U.S. The Trump administration decided and announced there would be extreme vetting of applicants, non-immigrant visa applicants' social media. And what that actually meant caused a lot of folks, and perspective is a very important piece here, a lot of folks in the United States that are in the international education profession today, particularly those that were attending the conference, when we had the opening plenary, they did a survey of who was in the room, and probably half the hands that went up seemed to be first-timers at the National NAFSA conference. Doesn't necessarily mean they're first-timers to the profession or new to the profession, but the likelihood is there's a correlation between the two. Because we know what happened during the pandemic. We saw a huge migration, vacation, departure of talent from our profession, where we saw senior leaders in the field basically be cut off or removed or retired or went to the dark side, did a number of different things. And we lost a lot of talent in the profession during the pandemic. And institutionally, those senior leaders were replaced with lower level or even entry level positions. And as a result, people that are coming new to the profession really aren't aware of all of what's come before kind of lessons that we've dealt with in the last decade in international education, 2 decades, or in my case, 32 years in the profession. So what we see at the conference is the news about, there are going to be extreme social media vetting of applicants before they come to the United States, before they make a decision whether they even give them a visa to come to the United States. So that was the reason for the delays, or the pause in new interview capacity at consulates and embassies. Anecdotal evidence from the field said that this was meaning no new appointments would be scheduled, but anyone with an existing appointment could still happen. And we do know that visas have been issued globally since that announcement was made over a week ago. So we do know that it wasn't a pause on any appointments, interview appointments. It was a pause pretty much on new, in terms of anecdotal stories that we're seeing. We have heard some say that they couldn't make an appointment or that their appointment got canceled. It might have been for some other reason, we don't know. But certainly it wasn't applied evenly or even understood evenly, and colleagues that I conversed with at the State Department during NAFSA all said, off the record of course, that they weren't expecting this to last for long. They were saying days, not weeks, and that the cause of this, and it wasn't a very well worded release or cable out to post. It was very vague, and no new additional capacity for interviews was to be added, but that got interpreted different ways in various posts around the world. So that is something that the social media piece was kind of shocked a lot of people, and delays and the timing couldn't have been worse, really. It's at the beginning of the peak visa season, May, June, July, and early August, or end of May, beginning of June, July, and early August, before most students can come to the U.S. to begin their studies. So yeah, why didn't this happen 3 months ago when they were doing all these other vetting things? But the 2 points. One, we do learn we learned how the relatively new people to the profession don't understand that back in 2019, the Trump administration actually changed the DS-160 form to begin asking for social media handles on that form. So it's been policy and part of practice that students, any non-immigrant visa applicant, not just students, any non-immigrant visa applicant to the U.S. since 2019 has had to give us their social media handles when they apply for a visa appointment. So that DS-160 form is an electronic form done online. Once that's done, they can select their appointment. So that's the process. So the conversation was last week, well, okay, do we have an obligation to tell students, particularly those we've just issued I-20s to, that the government will be asking for social media handles as part of their visa application? So do we have an obligation to do that? And most of us said, yeah, we probably should tell them, but legal counsel on our campus, general counsel, may significantly restrict what we can say. And certainly that reflected in conversations I was having with colleagues, posted that in a couple different places to get feedback. But I did ask one colleague at an institution that has the most international students in the United States. I asked, well, how do you handle it? And he said, well, since that policy was introduced 6 years ago, we've been letting students know that, hey, part of the process on this DS-160 form, you're going to be asked for your social media handles, and that you may want to watch what you say on social media and not go any deeper, because that's when you get into some legally murky areas. So we know why they're asking that, to vet for student activity that is potentially anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Trump, even if they really stretch it too far, and that would be too far in most everybody's opinions. But this administration does tend to be very negative towards anything that they disagree with, and we'll see some news stories popping this week. I just saw Karen Fisher's latest Latitudes newsletter focuses on ideological vetting of Fulbright applicants is also coming into play, going and coming. So we'll see some of this repeated, this kind of unilateral limiting of thought. That's certainly one of the things that freedom of speech for immigrants and students has been challenged with some of the rulings that the government has put in place. But the visa is something that the State Department controls, rightly or wrongly. They are the arbiter of who gets a visa to attempt to enter the country. And even if they have that visa, it doesn't mean they're guaranteed admission, because Customs and Border Patrol also has the ability to stop people from entering. Is the department that has, or part of the Department of Homeland Security that has that authority, because they control the border, who gets in, who doesn't. And they have also been using social media as a vetting tool for students that they have questions on that make it to secondary examination. And not just students get put in secondary, it could be anybody. U.S. citizens get put in secondary sometimes. I've been put in secondary and had my phone, tablet, and laptop taken, unlocked, and told I had to allow them to review the contents of my devices, including social media, to see if I had anything that was politically disagreeable to the administration. And that happened to me during the Biden administration. So that's not something that's just specific to Trump. So CBP has had that ability and has implemented that for many years. So the social media piece caught a lot of people at NAFSA off guard who were new to the profession, didn't really understand it, but it has been part of the process. Was that announcement, one of my colleagues who I've known for years, and we've traveled together around the world, including into China, made the comment, well, it's not about social media vetting at all. It was just another tool to upset the apple cart and cause confusion and disarray, and amongst other things. So the question about visa delays, what did we learn about the visa delays piece? And now that is probably the most directly impactful thing that impacts international recruitment offices, to international student services offices in these summer months, because this is when probably of our fall intake, 95% of our students are applying for their visas now. There's a few that have gotten them in the last 3 or 4 months, but the greater majority are going in this May to early mid-August window. So for us, like we start August, we have our orientation on August 20th. Our classes start August 25th. So we are kind of on that clock now at the University of Akron, making sure we're getting all our ducks in a row, tracking daily the amount of visa approvals we start hearing from students once we know they've gone, asking them to report back, all of that. So the visa delays piece is something that is it's causing. Talking to our ISSS executive director yesterday, the feeling is that we are being that students are expecting us to provide this guidance that we're magically expected to have. And we explain, obviously, this is something new. It's not a normal operating procedure for the government, and that we are basically saying, hey, it's relax. You don't have to defer your enrollment just yet. This we've been told it's a matter of days. There was a State Department briefing today that basically confirmed that by the end of this week, the delays should be lifted and normal service can resume. So will that week delay prevent most students from coming to the U.S. in the fall because they're not able to get an appointment before their classes begin? Probably not. But any changes to visas, that's one of the last steps before they get to campus that they're really stressing about, because they can have done everything right up until this point. They could have said, they could have applied early, they could have gotten their funding in place long in advance, but they've just now gotten their I-20s in the last few weeks, and they've made their appointments because there might have been a delay to make an appointment. But the good news is the delays seem to have lessened quite a bit in the last few weeks. So students are more easily able to get appointments before this pause was put in place. For example, we weren't seeing a lot of movement on India, but we're now starting to see movement on India in terms of getting visa appointments, and then now starting to get results. South Asia the same way, starting to see significant results. I can't explain enough or emphasize enough how important it is from here till classes begin, how responsive you need to be to your students, to let them know that it's okay, we got you, we're going to get through this together, we'll keep you updated, and that communication has never been more important, how regular it must be. So when this notice came out on Tuesday, by Thursday morning we had General Counsel approved language that we were able to send out to all our new students who we'd issued I-20s to let them know, hey, the social media questions are going to be asked, just be careful what you post. And why do we say that? Because we want to prepare them for what they're about to do before they fill out that DS-160 if they haven't already. So that means that it tells the students that you're aware as an institution of the challenges that they might face. And we talked about the visa delays, about how we've been told it's days, not weeks, and now we've got confirmation today from the State Department briefing that yesterday I think it was, the briefing was that by the end of the week the delays should be lifted. So 8-9 day delay is not going to prevent students from continuing their studies or beginning their studies with us. So lots of consternation over that first issue. Certainly we saw that there were statements made not only about the social media of visa applicants, there were news stories, and our international education's least favorite news channel, Fox News, had a story that shared Trump's State Department announces new student visa vetting will be ongoing process, not a one-time check. So obviously, once students are in the United States, that was one of the tools that was supposedly used in the trying to find any students that were posting stuff that was significantly anti-Israel or pro-Hamas, or in that respect, after Inauguration Day, that was a big initiative that the Trump made clear and had spent a lot of time emphasizing. They were going to be using social media, so even that's not a big surprise that this is a news story. But we know that social media is something that national security folks pay particular attention to, because that when we see it in the U.S. for American citizens and permanent residents, those who believe in the values of the United States, that freedom of speech is right up there as one of the most important pieces of who we are as a nation, and that freedom to say what you want is something we truly value. We know there are limits on that, and that's what if a government was checking social media, whether they say it or not, we know they're saying it now, that they are, that it wouldn't be seen as, well, you're just saying something we disagree with, as opposed to something that is pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas, that may be promoting violence of any kind, which is illegal. So that is something that there are legitimate restrictions on free speech. It isn't universal and without restriction. So we do know that that's ongoing. So the second question we're going to cover today is a related one, and it has to do with China, one of Trump administration's favorite targets. Besides tariffs and immigration, China is obviously involved with both of those in our sphere in international education. China is one of, if not the most, now I think it is actually back over on top of India as the number one source of international students in the United States. The challenge is that the other major bombshell that was dropped affects Chinese students, and that came on Wednesday after we were still recovering from the news from Tuesday, and that had to do Secretary of State Rubio came out, who has been a China hawk for a number of years through his Senate days. Basically said that there will be extreme social media vetting of Chinese, not extreme social media vetting, sorry, that's wrong, extreme or revocation of Chinese students' visas, that's current Chinese student visas, for those that have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. So that was, again, not a very specific statement on what level of those ties needed to be, when that was going to be implemented, how that was going to be determined. All of those things are, again, the first one was a cable out to post, which wasn't very clear and concise. This one was a statement Rubio made that we're going to be revoking Chinese students' visas if we find they have ties to the Chinese Communist Party, which isn't unusual in China. Of course, there are 300,000 or so Chinese students in the United States, so how that gets done is still undetermined. When that starts, how it begins, all of these things. And also the piece of how those that are studying in sensitive areas, as was a China initiative back in the first Trump administration that led to student visas, particularly those applying for STEM-related or national security-related issues. Those were coming from institutions that are part of China's civil-military fusion strategy, which, again, ties into the CCP stuff, all of that. So that was from Trump 1. Now the Trump 2 version is maybe a little bit broader perspective on that, but still casting a fairly wide net over 300,000 students. And of course, without the specificity, there are a number of articles that we're seeing that have popped that clearly state that it is a significant blow, like everything else. Whereas China does tend to take a much more strategic long-term view on things, the government in China has said they're seeing it as an affront. There will be consequences. All of that is typical China response to anything Trump has done. We saw that back last month when there was, or maybe end of April, when the Trump administration jacked up tariffs on China, and significantly with that. And then China's response, one of the responses was from the Ministry of Tourism that said that Chinese students in the U.S. should be on alert because of safety concerns, and was unnecessarily inflammatory, really. And also said, especially those studying in Ohio, because the state has passed legislation that is very much anti-Chinese, which it wasn't. It just required us to do reporting and said we couldn't accept gifts from Chinese sources. So that was anti-Chinese, so that meant students should reconsider travel to Ohio. And I shared last week one of the agreements we had lined up to go with an existing partner to add a summer program for students in the engineering fields to come and get a 2-week program in English and intensive engineering coursework, was canceled because of that statement by the Chinese Minister of Education. Their CCP person at their institution basically said, we can't go ahead with this program right now. It wouldn't be politically prudent for us to do so. So there's this constant back and forth between the Trump administration and China, and tit for tat, and we do something, you're going to do, they'll do something. And it's causing a lot of grief, and certainly is eliminating a lot of our concern, eliminating our chances of continuing to enroll significant numbers or doing anything specific in China, new and over and above what we are able to do based on these actions. We have some internal things we're struggling with, but that's okay. Everybody does. But what Karen Fisher has shared in her Latitudes column last week was that this action could create chaos in the student visa system. She talked about Rubio's statement, but also about the China initiative. So, not the China initiative, but the China action to aggressively revoke Chinese visas. So we see a lot of challenges coming up with China. We know that there is some real fear, and rightly so, when there's a very broad brush painted over Chinese students by the government, but the greater majority are going to be fine. Just like this visa revocation, or not the visa revocation, but the SEVIS terminations that happened in March and April only affected 0.3% of all international students, but it became seen as this vast plague that was ravaging the country to terminate student visas or student SEVIS records. Obviously, those were reinstated. So all of that process has just created anxiety, frustrations, and I'm not just talking about us in international education in the United States and ISSS and recruitment offices. I'm talking about students. And this is why those communication lines have to remain open, that you have to be in constant communication with your incoming students so that they're aware, and that you're making these statements and working with your general counsel, working with your senior leadership, because as they talked about last week and a week before, we've known this for a while, but managing up on our campuses is so important because it's an ever-changing landscape of minefields that we need to navigate. And having senior leadership at your campus on board with what's happening is so important, because if they're not aware of the challenges that you're facing now, then when enrollment comes or when orientation comes in the fall and numbers are down, if they don't see it coming and be at least prepared and say, hey, it wasn't our fault as an institution. We were keeping not only leadership informed, but keeping our students informed, current and future students. We're keeping them informed about what's going on. If and when we're doing that and we're making sure our leadership knows, the questions we get asked won't be as significant, or why did this happen? When you can say, well, I told you here, and here about all these various issues that are going to impact our fall class, our ability to enroll a fall class, and are out of our control. We're keeping our students informed regularly, weekly, on what's going on. So this is something that is an extra burden on us as institutions, but hey, we have to do that. We're here for these students, the ones we have on our campuses now and the ones we want to bring. And unless we can convince them that we're doing a good job and keeping them updated, even though we know, they know we don't necessarily agree with everything that our government is doing, we're at least keeping them informed on how government policy changes impact them, because they don't have the perspective to know the difference really in terms of what are going to be the most important issues here at play. So what motivates Marco Rubio in China? Again, he's always been an anti-China hawk, and has now, in his role as Secretary of State, is able to put in greater review and restrictions on students that from a country that he sees as a threat through espionage, through technology transfer, through various other sundry factors. Whether it's China's connection to research of sensitive areas, to stealing of technology, to subterfuge, political or otherwise. There's all sorts of things that there's legitimate concerns with, but how far we go in terms of the broad brush that we paint all students with, all students from China is something we really need to be aware of and make sure that our leadership on campus is aware of what's going on. So we're going to finish quickly with a last topic of interest that obviously with China we know that how our public universities and even top privates like Harvard, NYU, Columbia that have massive amounts of Chinese students are going to be directly impacted. We have a lot on our plates as international educators, but a country that shifting gears completely to what we normally talk about, want to talk about Japan. And we've mentioned some of these former Asian tiger powerhouse economies as they grew over the last 3 decades, have evolved and become mature Western markets in terms of their technology, in terms of their population, in terms of a variety of other factors. But Japan in particular has very much, we've seen this also in Korea, Taiwan, some other countries, they have very much aligned national strategic priorities, in particularly with their economy and employment and fields that they see developing, that they perhaps don't have the domestic population. That's one of the challenges in Western nations. We see this across Europe. We see this in East Asia. We certainly see this in the United States. As an aging population grows, there are less people coming in. We have a domestic enrollment cliff we're about to go off after this fall, where there's not enough people going into the fields we need them to go into to become the workers of tomorrow in the fields that we need them to study. So what a lot of countries are doing in Asia, particularly in East Asia, in these more mature economies, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, others, they are mapping their economic priorities with their international education priorities and realizing we not only need to send more of our students abroad to get that global experience and bring that back, we need to bring more international students to us that can then begin working in our industries after they graduate. So that's happening. Japan has a very robust goal. ISEF Monitor article covers that in depth. They want to attract over 400,000 international students by 2033 and send 500,000 Japanese students to study abroad in that same span. So we're talking about some very significant numbers here. Obviously not our numbers to send 500,000 Japanese. That's not all at once. That's over a period of over 8 years, I guess, 7-8 years. So we're seeing Japan make some significant strides to becoming an international ed hub and resource that make it a more competitive growth market and for students from around Asia and beyond. So interesting to see how Japan develops their potential there through these different programs, but we'll keep you posted as we do on all things international here on the Roundup. Thanks for everybody for joining us today for this week's edition. Next week I will be on site in Athens, Greece for a workshop put on by Language Cert, and I'll be actually traveling on the 11th, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get Roundup out. May record it on Tuesday and send it on Thursday talking about English language field. So we'll come back to you hopefully next Wednesday from Greece. So have a wonderful day, and we look forward to chatting with you in the weeks to come. Cheers.